So we'll start down on the ground. Locally, we have rattlesnakes. It's probably our most dangerous slithering species. And because they do live, or I should say we live where they live, sometimes they're in our yard. Sometimes they're in our garden. Sometimes they're in the playground where the school, where the kids are, excuse me. That's because, of course, the canyons and everything else we have here that go right up against our housing areas are beautiful habitat for them. Now, the rattlesnake's goal in life is to survive, find a mate, and make more rattlesnakes. That's pretty much every species, right? So when it comes to how rattlesnakes evolved thousands and thousands of years ago, what did they have to deal with? Well, bighorn sheep in our area once roamed these areas. Further east, maybe into the plains, we're talking bison, other large animals up in the mountains, elk, deer, things like that. Well, when you're no bigger than a short garden hose in the ground, and you're talking about these animals that weigh several hundred pounds with big hooves, what's the best thing you can do to defend yourself? Well, you want to rattle that tail, say that sharp staccato rattle should be a warning to most species stay away. Well, when humans start showing up on the scene, sometimes we get curious about what makes that noise. Or, because of the way we live and interact, we're much quieter than a large bison or elk who walks on the ground, putting out a vibration that the snakes can hear and feel. So oh, I'm going to do my rattle because I can feel the vibration of something big coming nearby. Well, we don't do that as much, or our pets or our kids don't do that as much. We don't vibrate the ground as much, we're not as heavy. So sometimes what happens is we come into that space or that encounter with no rattle. They're just as surprised as we are. Keep in mind, you're a giant. They're very small. So sometimes the next thing is I have to strike. Snakes don't have the capacity to contemplate, does that really look like that human's trying to hurt me, or are they just walking by? Is that human trying to hurt me, or are they just kind of digging through their garden, getting rid of some of the weeds? Is, oh my God, something big, I have to defend myself. More times than not, a rattlesnake bite is usually low venom because the venom is what feeds them. When they strike an animal to feed, which has got to be no bigger than 4 times their head, so they're not going to try and eat your Labrador. That's way too big. So that strike is a defensive strike. More times than not, they want to reserve their venom for the actual hunt of the meal. They aren't a constrictor. They're not going to grab their prey and constrict. They're going to strike, inject, the animal passes away, they swallow it. But what do you do? What do you do if you're out hiking, let's say, and you're enjoying the area, and all of a sudden you look down and there's a snake sunning itself on the path, because paths are great warming spots for an animal that's ectothermic or relies on outside temperatures to maintain its body weight. Don't immediately turn around and run, because while you were enjoying nature, you might have stepped right over another one that was resting there on the path. So if you identify one in front of you, look behind you first and then step back. That's your best bet, because should you step on it, of course, they'll probably strike you. More often than not, though, a rattlesnake would rather get away. It's going to rattle first if it has enough time, feels it can, and then once it feels that you figured out that's a bad thing to be near, they're going to try and go the other way. There's only really one snake species we know of on the planet that actively pursues trying to chase something, and that's the king cobra. So if you're over there in the regions where king cobras can be found, different story on how you want to interact with that, but in general, rattlesnakes are not going to chase you down. I've heard stories where people say, oh, well, I went running and it came after me. It's like, it was scared too. It didn't know where you went. It was just trying to get away. It happened to follow the same path you went on. Rattlesnakes don't have the greatest vision. They do have heat sensors, but it's not as clear as the predator that we see on movies, right? Where it's this perfect outline of these different color hues. It's a much more blurred image that they have. Also, locally, we have things like coyotes and bobcats. For the most part, you are bigger than they are, and they don't want to take the chance of maybe getting hurt by something bigger than them. That's just a general mode of thought process for most species when they're coming across a human. Now, the exception to this rule is if there's rabies involved. So if for any reason you come across a coyote or a bobcat that just doesn't look like they got all the screws nice and tight, they're a little bit weird on what they're doing, just back away as best you can and try and get away from the situation. Don't turn away and run, because anything running in a predator's mind is running because I'm supposed to chase it. So if you have a pet dog, you might know when you play the game of chase with your dog and you're chasing after your dog, and then you turn and run the other way, your dog comes chasing after you. That's an instinctual thing that it got from wolves, to chase something that's running away. Now, of course, in the domestic species it's play, but in predators out in the wild, maybe not. When it comes to things like bears or mountain lions / cougars, whatever you want to call them, also, for the most part, they would rather not engage with us. If you're out hiking around, make noise. You hear a lot of times, in fact, I go running in our canyons quite a bit, and mountain bikers have little bells that ding as they go. Because a mountain biker is a really fun prey item to chase if you're a cougar, right? I mean, that's perfect. And it's actually happened up in the hills. I think it was in Central California, Yeah, outside of San Francisco, a mountain biker had been jumped by a mountain lion. Because mountain lions like to go up on the high side of a path and wait for a deer to go by and then come down on top of it. Well, mountain biker down like this, they're back, they're moving, it's fun, let's get it. So it does happen, especially with younger predators. So cougars and bears that are younger are more likely to just attack first and think about what they grabbed later. Where the more seasoned adults are like, I want to make sure I can actually take that down and eat it without expending a bunch of energy and then it gets away from me. The other exception to all of these rules then when it comes to large predatory mammals, again bears, mountain lions, things like that, if babies are involved. So when we talk about bears, grizzly bears are massive. Not as big as the one we just saw in the preview, but they're massive. They're huge. Males will walk into a space and everybody else is like, it's yours, man. It's cool. We're good. But then later in the season, if there's a sow or a female who's a third of the weight and size of that male, and she's got cubs with her, she'll rear up on her hind feet and go, let's go, bro. And he's going to be like, I think I'm going to go this way. Very rarely will a large male who physically could take that female challenge her because attitude is everything in the wild when it comes to these predator relationships. And mother bears will mess up another adult male bear with no questions asked if she's got cubs with her. No cubs later in the season, she'll be like, hey, I'm out of here. See you, buddy. It's cool. And so what we want to do, should we interface with this wildlife where we cross paths with them, we want to be big and scary. We don't want to turn our backs on them. And I'm talking whether it's a coyote or a bobcat, mountain lion, any of those things. Should you come across any of those predatory wildlife, the idea is that, no, I'm standing my ground, I'm going to look you right in the eye. Because what happens when the predator knows eye contact's been made, the element of surprise has been lost. If you start to turn your back, they'll be like, okay, they can't see me, I'm going to sneak up a little closer. Anybody with a pet cat play that game with their cat at home? You peek around the corner, and you go back, and then you go back again, and they're a little bit closer, but then they freeze because they don't want to be seen. Yeah, we've all done that. I've seen that also in big cats with people who care for them in the zoo environment, where they know, obviously they're not in the space with them, but they'll play that peekaboo game with them, and you see a full-size tiger doing the same thing. I can't be seen, so I'm going to move. As soon as I'm seen, I'm going to freeze. If you should come across any of this wildlife in the wild, you want to make that eye contact, you want to face forward. You do maybe want to glance back and make sure there's nothing else behind you, okay? And you want to be big and loud and scary. And if you are out hiking in the wilds, I always recommend camping or hiking, no matter if it's our local San Diego County or anywhere else, check with your local rangers. Every park we have has some sort of ranger, a website, something you can go to, where they're going to warn you, this particular season we have. I think it was about 4 years ago, maybe 3, we had a report of a young boy, I think 4 or 5 years old. He got jumped by a young mountain lion in Rancho Penasquitos Canyon. Now, who would have thought mountain lions would have made their way that far down into San Diego County? We haven't seen them in forever. But what it was a juvenile who mom kicked him out much further north, and he was trying to find territory for himself. He was starving. When they found the cougar, he was pretty emaciated. And so at that point, a very hungry animal that's young and inexperienced will go after whatever it can if it thinks it can. And unfortunately, that boy was injured, but not heavily injured, but he did get hurt. And what a scary situation for that family, of course, too. So again, it's one of those things where I always encourage you to be thoughtful when you are in wild spaces, to consider what might be around. I personally, when I'm in the wild, I have this conflict of making noise and not making noise, because I want to keep predators away from eating me, but I also love seeing wildlife, so if I make noise, it scares other wildlife away too. So it's kind of this conflict, but as I always think, it's better safe than sorry in those situations. So the one thing they want to have me leave a few minutes for is any questions or any thoughts on dealing with our local wildlife? Yes?
Skunks.
Skunks, I love skunks, they are awesome. They are, they're very cute little stinkers. Skunks in general, for the most part, are going to leave us alone. Again, like the rattlesnake, if they are surprised, their defense is to blast out that stink. Unfortunately, domestic dogs don't understand why this cute black and white kitty doesn't want to play. And so they keep antagonizing it until they get blasted, usually. Now, of course, skunks and raccoons, which we have in abundance here in San Diego, can also have rabies. I encourage you to always give them space. I have raccoons that come through my backyard every night. I adore them. I'll hit the porch light and just sit there at the window and watch. My cat goes right next to me. We're like, oh, cool. The neighbors are out. But I don't dare go out there. And not because I'm afraid of them so much as I know if I do feed them or interact with them, it encourages possibility that they're going to be like, hey, what's inside that house? Like I just brought something down of it, let's go and check it out. But also should any of them at some point ever come down with something that makes it so their brain's not working right, which would be rabies, that increases the chance that I'm going to get hurt or someone else could get hurt as well. So always when you see your local wildlife of any sort, especially skunks and raccoons, keep a safe distance. Enjoy them, turn lights on, watch them move, but just keep a safe distance. Was there a question around that, or just want to shout out skunks?
Just wanted you to talk about skunks.
I love skunks. I love skunks. They're the best. They're the best. One last one too. We have quite a few of hawks. We have some beautiful hawks, and we'll hear stories every now and then. There's one story I get every now and then when I go to New York and do the talk shows out there. Oh, did you hear about that hawk in Central Park? It's always attacking people, attacking runners. In general, it's not Alfred Hitchcock birds happening. It is what? It's a bird protecting its nesting area. Has a nest nearby and feels that these people running through on this path are aggressive and too close, and so get out of my neighborhood, I want you out of here. The other possibility too, because there's been stories where it's like, oh, this bird's always stealing people's hats. It might be a young juvenile who's inexperienced and understands what the human looks like, and they're not a food source, but there's something fuzzy on their head. I could probably eat that. So they're going to come down and steal that. And eventually they learn, this is not food. I'm wasting my time and my energy. But these are where these stories tend to come from when you hear about birds attacking. Did you have a question back there?
Oh, I was going to say, I live over by San Diego State, but not on one of the canyons. Skunks, possums, raccoons.
Mm-hmm.
Raccoons on the top of a shed at night can be very scary.
Yes, they can.
It's this big.
Yeah, they can get up to 40 pounds, and the males especially are not to be trifled with if they get territorial, or a mom with babies as well. Opossum's another fun one too. Opossums cannot have rabies, so don't worry about them, but still don't bother them. Their body temperature is too low as a marsupial. Their body temperature is too low for rabies to survive inside, so even if they're bitten by something that is rabid, they're like, yeah, whatever. Nice thing about opossums too, they eat ticks. They don't go hunting for ticks, they eat ticks off their body, but they're so low to the ground, they're like a little street sweeper, so the ticks hop on, and they can just eat them all, 50 some a night sometimes, so they're good to have around. Also, they'll eat your they'll eat snails and slugs and other things in your garden, and just about anything else that they can find as far as carrion or other bugs that are bothersome. Fun little fact, I don't want to take too much time, but a fun little fact with opossums, you've heard about them playing dead? Okay, if I play dead, I can choose to close my eyes and pretend I'm dead. Opossums can't choose to do that. Just like if you're pulling out of here today and you hit the pedal to go because it's your turn to go in the intersection out of this parking lot and someone comes racing in front of you, almost hits you, your heart rate goes up and you get a little adrenaline boost, right? You didn't choose to suddenly go into that slight fight or flight moment. Your bodies just did it because of what happened. For opossums, it's the same reaction or involuntary, but what happens is it releases hormones that slows the heart rate, drops the body temperature, and they pass out. It's not voluntary. So that's why sometimes you can swear that opossum you scooped out of your garage and put it in your trash bin because it was dead and stinky, and in the morning it's gone because it wasn't really dead. What happens too is their body actually releases and emits an odor that makes it smell like they're dead. It's their defense, and apparently it's worked fairly well for them over the eons. So. With that, any last questions before we get started with your movie? No? All right, well, thank you so much for letting me spout about our predators and animals that probably won't attack you here in San Diego. Enjoy your film.